Before we get started, first I want to issue another correction. I've been fucking up a lot lately, but last said that there were 3 Battle Royale movies. There's actually only 2. I was confused because there was a re-release of Battle Royale 3D, and I just assumed that the 3 was like a double meaning.
Oh.
It was like Battle Royale 3 in 3D, but it's not.
Okay, good.
Second thing, I wanted to go over some very kind people that left us review on iTunes. If you guys have time, leave us a review on iTunes. It means a lot to us. This one is from Raymundo. He says, good quality entertainment. I've always been a fan of the YouTube channel, but often felt like it lacked a truly satisfying Wisecrack critical analysis of the films that they talk about, but at last that void has been filled, and now I am content with all that is Wisecrack. Thank you, Raymundo. This one is from Lodos09. All your podcasts are great. My Skinner box brain has a rush of good endorphins every time I see a new episode is available. Thank you, sir. And this one is from Plamtina. She says, he or she says, Wisecrack is so smart, but also easy to understand. The intern is great with the other humans in there. Great Earth content. I got an Earthling Cinema joke in there. All right, cool. All right, guys, so today we are talking about the 1977 movie written and directed by David Lynch starring Jack Nance, Eraserhead. Let's go ahead and get some first impressions. First time you watched the movie, most recent time you've watched the movie. Let's start with our guest, Adam.
Oh, wow. Hey. I'm a giant hypocrite because I do consider myself a David Lynch fan, but I had never seen Eraserhead until you invited me on the podcast. And I was like, well, I should do this. Do you guys have movies in your lives like this where you know everything about it, but you've never actually seen it, but you do feel like you have seen it?
Too many of those.
Yeah, and so Eraserhead was something that it was one of those movies my mom wouldn't let me watch, so I knew of it. I saw pieces of it. I read up on it. I've seen so many behind-the-scene documentaries on it, all this stuff. So it was kind of fun actually sitting down and just watching the movie. I will say, of all the David Lynch movies, it's actually probably one of his easier ones to follow.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
I think once you figure out the basic allegory, it's a pretty straightforward movie. And I think it's actually, if anything, I think this is something that should be taught in film school. It obviously is. But this is a movie that I think you can sit someone down and go, this is how you make a movie for nothing.
Yeah.
And this is also how you do it in the 70s.
Yeah.
So if you want to make a movie today, you have no roadblocks. Because look what that man did. You could do the same.
All right, cool. And so, real quick, I just want to hear if you're a David Lynch fan. What are your top Lynch movies?
Number one's Mulholland Drive.
Okay.
And then Blue Velvet. Did you say top 5?
Or just top couple?
Can I put Dune in there multiple times? Or no?
Oh, my God.
That's actually the one I haven't seen because of that. You know?
Yeah, breaking down, it would be the 2 I just mentioned, and then Lost Highway. Actually, put Eraserhead up there now, too. He hasn't made a movie that I dislike, and I haven't seen Inland Empire, so we'll just leave it there.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Ryan.
Yeah, I love this movie. This movie is great. I'm very curious to hear the allegory because I've never had this movie really explained to me. Really, I've absorbed it a couple times, and I love every minute of it. But I definitely couldn't tell you what David Lynch was going for. But I don't think he would if he was here, he'd really care.
Right.
He'd be like, hey, it's just about the feeling, man. Which, yeah, the mood is the movie. Is kind of my summary review of this movie. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about just the form of it in general because yeah, it's amazing. You say he made this for nothing though, but like, and I agree that there's no roadblocks now for in cinema especially, but it seems like this movie took a lot of money even for then. Like at least with the effects and the scenes or the sets that they all built, it seems like it still a
took
pretty
a lot of
ambitious undertaking for an low budget independent movie. Is all I'm saying. But yeah, my favorite David Lynch movies: number 1, Wild at Heart; number 2, Mulholland Drive; number 3, Blue Velvet.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on to Austin.
Yeah, this actually was the first time that I'd ever seen Eraserhead as well. I mean, I'm always hesitant to say I'm a fan of any particular director because I'm very impermanent just in my life in general. So I'm not like committed to David Lynch, but I think he's an extremely fascinating and competent and important filmmaker.
I am committed to David Lynch.
Me too.
I mean,
Till the
yeah,
day I
I guess
die.
in my, like in my life, I'm just not like even sports franchises, right? Like I'm more into like the players than I have been like the franchise. So I don't know. It's just like a weird personality trait, I guess, or flaw.
Wait, so you don't
who
like
ask.
you like the movies, you're just not committed to the filmmaker?
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
to me, I don't need to make that like abstraction to the mind behind it. I'm completely content with just enjoying the content as individual pieces. If that makes sense. And if it just happens to be the fact that they have a commonality because they derive from a common source, then that's great. That's if you really ask me. So in that sense, like I like David Lynch films, but I feel like this film is something that, again, like Adam was just saying, like I feel like I've known so much about this. I feel like I know more about David Lynch from reading about him and hearing people talk about him than I actually do from even seeing his films. Like I've seen Blue Velvet, I've seen Inland Empire, I've seen Mulholland Drive, and I've now seen Eraserhead. Never seen Dune, never seen Wild at Heart. I like Twin Peaks, but I have not seen the reboot. And I'm not like racing to get to it. Does that make sense? Like,
Sure.
I feel like it's more like an intellectual thing for me.
Is it one of those weird situations too, where sometimes the creator's more infamous than the content they are creating? And that
Yeah, I mean, because how many times do people say, "Oh, it's so Lynchian," right? It's like turned into a verb now. Is like. Or an adjective. I mean, it's Lynchian cinema, or it's a Lynchian mood, or this guy's very Lynch. This film is very Lynchian.
Did it have a long shot that held on something that had some weird audio effect that wasn't quite music, but it had like it just went for a little too long? It's like Lynchian. Yeah.
Did it zoom into
or
a
if
light
it's
bulb?
surreal
Lynchian.
or something. Yeah. So, but I mean, all that to say, I find this film to be extremely fascinating. I'm not sure that I can make a value judgment, like if I like it or don't like it. I'm not sure that this type of film is even meant for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind
All right,
of.
cool. Well, I fucking love this movie. I have seen it so many times. I've probably seen this movie more times than any other David Lynch movie, maybe other than Mulholland Drive. Maybe I've seen more times. I've seen this movie in times where I had no idea what the hell was going on. I've seen this movie times where I had like these moments of clarity that aren't even necessarily like narrative clarity. Like there weren't times where I was like, oh my God, I know exactly what's going on. But the movie would capture me and put me in this mind space where I felt like, I was just constantly being sucked in. Like even if, in a traditional narrative movie, you might have beats or how conflict escalates and it draws you deeper and deeper in. I felt like on some level this movie would draw me deeper and deeper in, even on a level outside of plot, in which I had no idea what was happening in any literal sense, but on some sort of subconscious level, I was just into it. I was like, yes, this doesn't make sense, but it makes sense. And that's really special to me. For somebody who spends his time watching and analyzing and trying to get salient ideas out of movies, I'm really, really appreciative and just grateful that something exists that is able to thwart all my efforts at analyzing it, and yet I'm still just as transfixed, probably even more transfixed. So I love the hell out of this movie. Actually, about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, David Lynch's memoir / biography, because it's both written by a biographer and him separately, just recently came out, and it's called Room to Dream, and I've been reading that, so I've got a couple of quotes to bring into what we're discussing here. But for my favorite Lynch films, my favorite Lynch property is Twin Peaks Season 3, and it's not a reboot, it is Season 3.
If Twin Peaks is in the running, then that's my number one. But
okay, sure. If we're just talking about movies, I would put this one up there. I would also put Lost Highway up there. The one that's firmly at the bottom for me is the one that's at the top for Ryan, which is Wild at Heart.
Son of a bitch.
That's the only Lynch movie, or the only thing Lynch has ever made that doesn't work for me.
Even Dune, you would say works for you? Or did you
that's the one I haven't seen.
Dune does not work at all for me, or Lost Highway.
But it didn't work for David Lynch either.
Right.
I mean,
Dune doesn't work for any sane human, I don't feel. Because it literally doesn't make sense. Literally doesn't make.
That's actually the chapter that I'm just at. So I'm actually curious to learn about it. It's a huge studio fiasco, right?
Yeah,
the story behind that.
I mean, his name's not on it, so I don't know if you could technically call it a David Lynch movie.
Oh, really? Is it
Yeah.
just no directors credited?
Alan Smithy, I believe.
Oh, okay. So it's a pseudonym.
It's the. I mean, have you seen the documentary? I'm gonna
Jordy
butcher his-
Oski's
yeah.
Dune?
No, I haven't.
That one's great.
It's really good.
Does it cover the Lynch era?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Like, I mean, to the point where they talk about how this is what it was going to be, and then Star Wars came out and ruined everything because they're like, we need a Star Wars, make Star Wars. So that's why you got what you got. But it's still David Lynch inspired, but then Sting's there, and no one wanted Sting there, and it's a whole.
Oh yeah.
It's a big mess. So
Okay.
I'm excited that I forget the director's name. The one who just did Blade Runner is doing Dune. So
Oh, Villa. I'm not even.
I'm
Gonna
not gonna
try and
say it.
it.
Denny-
because I'm gonna fuck it
Dennis
up.
Yeah, Denny
Villeneuve.
I will call him Denny.
Yeah.
Good old friend Denny.
Like in the room, Danny. Anyway, all right. So let's go into a recap.
Hey, could I give a shot at a 15-second recap of the movie?
All right. So before we go into the recap, Ryan is going to attempt a recap. Go for it,
All right.
Ryan.
All right, Eraserhead. A man is on vacation, finds out he has alien baby, finds a mysterious shelf, has sex with his neighbor in goop. His head falls off and a child takes it and turns it into erasers. He wakes up. His baby won't stop laughing, so he stabs it. Shit hits the fan. The end.
All right. Cool.
Pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate.
That's what I got at the end of that movie.
All right.
And I
so
loved every second of it.
let me give you. I'm going to do something unconventional. I was actually going to read this after the recap, but I'm going to do it before the recap. So I'm actually going to start this conversation with a quote from David Foster Wallace. He says, an academic definition of Lynchian might be the term that refers to a particular kind of irony where the very macabre and the very mundane combine in such a way as to reveal the former's perpetual contaminant with the latter. So, this will be more relevant to what basically, and once again, I just want to make a statement here that if you analyze this movie and try to derive anything concrete for it, you are missing the point. To what Ryan said earlier, yes, the tone is the movie. So although because what we do is we kind of analyze and stuff like that, we will do a little bit of that, but ultimately I don't want us to, have to feel like we're trying to derive some sort of political or philosophical statement, because I just think that it's just not appropriate.
We don't have to show them the meaning.
It is if the meaning is the tone, then we show them that.
I'm just kidding.
All right. Anyway, so let's go into a recap. Oh, and I'm sorry to say that the David Foster Wallace thing. The whole point is that I think what he's saying is how Lynch will kind of dramatize the mundane in a very dark, macabre way. It's almost as if he's taking something very mundane and just dramatizing it in the most dark, absurd way possible. So if you strip away the movie of the bizarre props, the sound design, it's actually a very basic story like what Adam is saying. So let's just go into it. So now there are some elements here that are not accounted for in this recap that I don't think make sense, but this is the general thing. So inside a planet, a mysterious figure pulls two levers, catapulting us into the mind space of our protagonist, Henry. Henry is on the way back to his apartment when his beautiful neighbor across the hall informs him that a woman named Mary called and asked him to dinner with her parents. Henry arrives at Mary's house, where things are immediately awkward. Tension boils over at the dinner table, and Mary's mother tells Henry that Mary has recently given birth to a deformed baby of sorts, and that Henry is the father. So Henry and Mary get married, move in together, and start taking care of the baby. The baby's incessant crying and stubborn behavior causes Mary to leave. When the baby gets sick, Henry seeks serenity inside the radiator, where he meets a woman with large cheeks stomping on umbilical cords that resemble the baby. Back at his apartment, Henry is seduced by the beautiful woman across the hall, but once she notices the baby, she is mortified. That night, Henry fantasizes again about the woman in the radiator, but this dream quickly turns into a nightmare when his head pops off and his brain is sold to make erasers on pencils. Henry still lusts after the woman across the hall, and the baby starts to laugh at his humiliation. When Henry sees her coming home with a new guy, Henry tries to cut the baby out of its bandages and kills it. The man in the planet laughs as his levers malfunction, and Henry unites with the woman in the radiator. End of movie. All right, well, Ryan, I want to hear what does that sound like to you?
You mean what?
The recap, like, does that sound like?
Sound like a pretty thorough recap. What do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying you said that like you weren't able to really derive a meaning out of it. Like, does that resonate?
I just thought it was funny when you write down everything that happens in this movie and read it out. and if you gave it to someone who'd never seen it, they'd be like, wait, what? You know? Yeah, that's all I was commenting on. But yeah, I'm just as engrossed with the movies as you guys.
It feels like a test if you're raising a child and you were raising them on film. On one hand, you show them RoboCop, which is a very literal movie, fun movie. And then when they got a little bit older, you would say, now watch this. And if they could derive any meaning out of it, that would mean that they're starting to use their brain a little bit more than they would watching like a Fast and the Furious movie, where they are not taking everything at face value. You go, oh, does that represent that? And they go, good for you. You can now read books that are probably too old for you. So this sounds so up my own ass, but
That's what we do here.
The film is art.
Yeah,
and that is like that. The most base level what art can be is like, what do you interpret from this thing? It's up there with a painting on a wall. That's what's cool about
and
it.
he started off as a painter, and I think that there's a certain level of maturity. It's all that you get through at some point in your life where you realize that some things you have to just suspend your desire to make literal sense out of something, and if you can do that, then you can appreciate it and enjoy it. But if you're so stubborn as to try and look for motivation for every detail, it's going to thwart you and it's going to disappoint you.
Yep.
I think David Foster Wallace is right on though. Like every one of his movies, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, has that kind of. He kind of made that subgenre of like the everyday neighborhood, but the creepy undertone vibe.
Twisted Americana.
Yeah, like Stepford Wives kind of a vibe that he perverted.
So let me start this off. Let me read a quote from his biography that just came out, which I really recommend if you guys out there are David Lynch fans. It's called Room to Dream. The structure of it is really interesting. The first chapter is written by his biographer, and then the second chapter is basically like a Fine Brothers React video. He reads the chapter and then basically writes his own chapter. That's kind of like a correction or a reflection on him reading his own biography.
Awesome way to do an autobiography.
Yeah. So let me find this quote. Okay. Lynch has commented that I felt Eraserhead. I didn't think it. And anyone who fully surrenders to the film understands what he means. Much has been made of the queasy humor of Eraserhead, but to focus on its comical aspects is to give a superficial reading of a multi-layered work. A magisterial film that operates without any filters of sort, Eraserhead is pure id. The narrative of the movie is simple. Living in a dismal post-industrial dystopia, a young man named Henry meets a girl named Mary who becomes pregnant. Henry is gripped with anxiety as the rival of their deformed infant and longs for the release of the horror he feels. He experiences the mystery of the erotic, then the death of the child, and finally, the divine intercedes and his torment ends. In a sense, it's a story about grace. So I'm not saying that that did not come from Lynch. That came from his biographer, and I don't think we should take that as like a canon reading. But I think that, I didn't get that the first time I watched it, but that's basically what I get after repeated viewings.
I have heard Lynch say that when he was making this film, that he had a couple of inspirations, Gogol and Kafka. But he said that he opened up the Bible and read one verse and closed the Bible, and then that kind of helped him in his formation of this film. So he says that in a way, this is actually his most spiritual film. And he's not saying that it's like some sort of literal representation of biblical themes or anything like that. But I think his point is that it's like aiming towards the transcendent or to the mysterious or to the esoteric, to that which is just beyond the grasp in a very intentional sense, whether it's felt or intellectualized. I think that is kind of what he meant when he said that.
Do you know the verse?
No, he doesn't even remember.
Oh.
That's what he said. He said he doesn't even remember what it was now, but it was something at the time that he read, and he was just like, okay, closed it, and then it kind of just gave him a moment of inspiration.
Don't put corn and beans in the same hole.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be that's why there's that bit
Then
about
I made
heaven,
Eraserhead.
that everything in heaven is going to be fine. This idea of maybe some sort of eschatological or soteriological, which means like salvation, right? Some sort of escape from the suffering or inadequacies or anxieties of this world. Because the main character, dude, I mean, he's constantly thwarted in his desire, right? Like that's what this film really puts on display, is that he is this perpetually dissatisfied figure. and it's this battle between his desires and his inability to attain the objects of his desire, and then his covering over that inability with fantasies that he is playing with, and the tension that you get with the lack and then the excess between those two. And maybe heaven is like this image of fantastic final culmination or something. And so maybe that's part of the spirituality that Lynch was exploring, whereas I think his other films, they're a little bit bleaker.
Well, in this movie, you can argue that he gets literal salvation in the sense that, yeah, he is overcome by anxiety not only in the plot, but in the visuals and especially in the sound design. I mean, this whole thing has these droning industrial sounds. It'll crescendo and get really screechy. You can just feel the anxiety in everything from the sound. And then at the end, you know, in a sense, there is like a Deus Ex Machina. Like, everything goes to shit, and he just achieves his fantasy, which is the woman in the radiator.
Right. And so
after murdering a baby.
Right, yeah, and
Right.
that's like clearly, like literally God just like plucks you out of your worst nightmare and says, here's paradise.
Or maybe it's the idea that the only way that you can ever achieve the satisfaction of your desire is through some sort of radical immolation. There has to be some sort of destruction in order to pacify your anxieties so that you can actually indulge in your fantasies. And I think that there's something really interesting, and I think you see this theme throughout Lynch's works, is that it's about that tension between fantasy and desire as lack. And
well, how would you work that with the, because I think one of the interesting things is the woman in the radiator versus the beautiful woman across the hall, because on the one hand, it uses some pretty clear common archetypal structures. So like the woman in the radiator is associated with white. She's crazy wholesome. She's got white cheeks. Her hands are in this like semi-prayer situation. And their moments of bliss and intimacy are like these explosions of blissful, bright light. Whereas the beautiful woman across the hall is associated with darkness and lust, and their intimate moment is them making love in like a black boiling pit. So there is this kind of discrepancy between like almost a lustful desire and a more idealistic desire that ultimately is his salvation at the end.
Sure, but before he gets to that point, which only happens after he kills the baby, before then he can't actually even touch the woman in the radiator. Whenever he tries to, I don't think that white light is a good thing. I think that's the barrier that prevents him from actually touching what Jacques Lacan would call the real. He's not able to touch the object of his desire. And so that's why you get that cutaway in the reverse shot, where he actually isn't there anymore. And then it goes back to her, and then they try to touch again, and it goes to white again. And then it goes back, and he's there, and then it goes back to her, and she's not there. And so there's this absence and presence that is perpetually thwarting his ability to actually touch the woman in the radiator until he kills the baby. Then he can go and indulge in the fantasy. And that's where you get that strange tension. So all of it up to then is this interplay of the object of your desire, which is, the woman across the hall, and the idea that they do have this fantastic sexual encounter, which I thought was a dream. I didn't think it was real. So it's a dream, the way that I kind of read it. And then you get the experience of her actually hooking up with another dude that pisses him off to the point where he then kind of retreats back into his room. And that's what kind of pushes him to have to kill the baby. It's because he realizes that he can't get this other object of his desire. So there's this perpetual inability to have a sexual relation, which again is something that Jacques Lacan talks about. He says there is no such thing as a sexual relation. And what he means is that all of our encounters are ultimately mediated through the fantasy. There's no such thing as a pure encounter with another person, but it's always this fantasy that we're living that both stifles our ability to be satisfied and then at the same time perpetually drives us on to seek more satisfaction.
So one of the things I think is super interesting about this movie is, you never know where the line, like when should I start consuming this as plot and how should I start consuming this as excess? And so, for example, I would say, so the way that you and I are interpreting this differently, Austin, is that I would say that he does have a sexual experience with the woman across the hall, but she sees the baby, and that grosses her out and freaks her out, and then that's why the kid starts laughing at him. And you could argue that this is some sort of metaphor for sexual humiliation. Maybe it wasn't that she was disgusted by the kid so much as maybe he couldn't perform. And so the kid is laughing at him, either A, because he fucked up the romantic experience, or B, because he's impotent. And then when he sees her with the other guy, he's like completely humiliated, and that's why he takes it out on the baby.
Yeah, I mean, either way, the baby seems to absolutely stand for some sort of castrating barrier to his enjoyment, right?
Right.
Like something, no matter what, whether it's the relationship that he has with Mary, or this supposed desire that he has for this woman across the hall, or even the woman in the radiator that might be the sort of overcoming of all of those other tensions. The baby is some sort of barrier that prevents him from that. And so that seems to be on clear display.
That's the one thing that might actually be literal. It's a baby. And I think if yeah, I mean, it's no, I don't think it's a mistake, or it's an accident that the character Henry dresses and kind of looks like David Lynch. And he had a child at this point. He had a daughter.
Yeah.
And that's probably something that, whether he knew subconsciously, whether he knew it or not, he was projecting that having a child means you can't have a certain life anymore. And that is the way I look at everything. To me in this movie was a dream, or a way you would interpret something if you were high in DMT or something like that. It's like a lucid dream. So there's a really good moment where the woman looks at him and it's his body with the baby's head. And that could be Henry either thinking that's how she sees him, or that's how she sees him. Either way, it's sorry, I would rather be with this guy with a weird scar on his face, or like a burn mark, whatever that guy was, than you, because you have a baby. And that to me was like almost literal, like that, except the baby happens to be this creepy puppet.
It's also worth noting, to your point, that he was in his like early to mid 30s when he was making this. It was late in his, he hadn't really had a filmmaking career. He'd gone to AFI, was making this at the time, and so it is kind of interesting that you bring that up, that this movie is kind of about how shitty raising a kid is, while he had a kid. I wonder how Jennifer Lynch feels about that. I think
she's in the movie.
That's her name, right?
Yeah, she's in the movie, and
yeah.
I mean, he was living at AFI. Like, most of the movie is shot at AFI on one of the studios, which is actually very close to where we are right now. And he was living there during the thing, and it took him. He started production at the end of 1971, and it didn't come out till 1977. I mean, he created every single element. And earlier Adam said that like this is a lesson for independent filmmakers. I agree, but I also think that David Lynch is such a genius that man, I just don't think anyone or that any normal person could be as resourceful and as creative as him. You know what I'm saying?
It's inspiring.
Yeah, I think it should serve as inspiration, where I'm almost positive. I would love to hear his thoughts on it, obviously, but the thing I took from this was certain things like the man in the planet, or all these different things they're there because he couldn't do a certain thing. He thought it was art through adversity. He thought, how can I creatively showcase an impregnation, because the technology to put a camera inside a woman doesn't exist yet. Not until Look Who's Talking did we get that miracle. But
and then Enter the Void took it to the next level.
Right?
2 years later.
Exactly. So I think just because he's naturally a creative person, I think that does serve as, that should be inspirational to anyone, where you go, it's great to tell people no, because then you have to think, okay, how can I creatively get around this? And that's what this entire movie feels like.
Dude, I love that interpretation. I'd never really come up with an idea of what the man in the planet was. I think that him kind of making the pregnancy happen is great. It's interesting in the book. So first of all, the guy in the planet is Jack Fisk, who's a very famous production designer, and him and David Lynch grew up together, and Jack Fisk married Sissy Spacek. And anyway, so that's him.
I think she helped fund it too through that connection, is because they kept running out of money, and both Fisk and Spacek actually contributed their private funds to help him finish the project over the years.
Thank you, Sissy if I'm gonna fucking
Sissy Spacek.
Yeah, I can't fucking say it. But anyway, it's interesting though.
Holly Hunter or Holland Hunter.
Oh yeah, don't
Helen
give
Hunt.
me that shit. So Jack Fisk actually says, and of course this is not rule of law, but he says Eraserhead is about karma. The man in the planet is pulling levers to symbolize karma. Now that's just the man who plays him. I don't really buy that. I watched the film last night with that in mind, and I'm like, I don't see it. But
Yeah, I even watching it the first time, the first thing I thought of seeing, I think the first image you see is the sperm type creature coming out of Henry's mouth, and then a man who is something pulling levers, and then the sperm being thrown into a puddle. I saw that as that's what I would do if I didn't want to film two people having sex in a movie, because that makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to put these two people in a weird situation. So like, how can we creatively do this thing other than a train going through a tunnel, you know?
Yeah.
And because if you've ever watched the short films of David Lynch, it's a great DVD collection. Watch how he does the ABCs. Like he made a horror film basically of his little sister singing the ABCs, and it's frightening. So he's a guy who I think can figure a moment out like that, and probably is really good at interpreting his thoughts and dreams better than most people are.
Oh yeah.
See, I would say that like to Jack Fisk's point, like about what you said, it's about karma. It makes more sense if it's like about fate, right? Like it's like there's just somebody behind, you know, pulling the levers on your life, kind of, and kind of like to David Lynch, you know, it should be noted that he's a really heavy into transcendental meditation, right? So all this dream stuff can be led to that.
He was introduced to transcendental meditation like midway through the film, and it's said that like the film did undergo some rewrites when he discovered Maharishi Yogi or whatever his name is. And
in terms of the form of how he really creates the dream aspect, like when you leave the theater and you're like, what the fuck did I just watch? I feel like the one trope that he does a lot to awesome effect, and a few other movies do this, is the kind of Mobius strip structure that he does where he begins and ends in at the same place, right? So he does that in Eraserhead. You know, you kind of begin and end with the man and the planet. You don't see him. It bookends the movie. Then Mulholland Drive's the best example of it, where literally the whole movie is like it goes in a circle if you follow the structure, right? Almost in a time travel-y manner. And then the same thing with like Inland Empire and stuff. And anyway, he uses it to where basically it creates this effect that where you get to the same point, and it's a dream-like narrative structure that I feel like that he uses awesomely.
So Adam mentioned the sperm look like things. There are a couple of facts in this book. Those are real umbilical cords that Jack Fisk got from a hospital, and he told the hospital that they were just going to be like in jars in the background of a movie, but nope, they were throwing them against walls and stomping them and all sorts of shit. Another fun piece of trivia before I move on. So I remember years ago, Ryan told me that no one knows how he made the baby, and I just assumed that that was. I'm also very skeptical of IMDb trivia. I kind of like in our fake news era, I'm just like, man, who checks that shit? But in the book, you're right. Nobody knows. He won't tell anybody.
Apparently, he blindfolded the projectionist so that even the projectionist wouldn't kind of see the gag. So there's all this speculation, whether it's like the lamb fetus or if it's a rabbit or whatever. There are all these various theories out there.
Yeah,
so no one knows.
There in the book, it seems to suggest that David Lynch has a very he's not freaked out by dead things. He made these things called kits. We would literally take a dead animal and like dissect it and create like a little art kit based on this dead thing. So I think that's probably why he's kept it a secret, is because
so
it
he's
is
a serial
probably
killer, is what you're saying.
It is probably like he's probably puppeteering some sort of dead animal.
He maybe channeled his serial killer instincts into directing. So hey, that's healthy. That's good.
Yeah.
No one's died as a direct result of one of his films, so that's good. I think I'm fairly certain though, watching that thing, it's too good to be a puppet. I'm almost positive it was once a living thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess are there no medical records of what a lamb fetus looks like? Could we not do this research ourselves?
Well, how long would it last, right? If it
That's the
weren't
scary question.
Preserved, and how long did they shoot? I mean, they clearly had that thing
6
on
years.
set for a long time.
I guess if it was embalmed, that
Yeah,
was the
that's what I was
theory.
gonna say, yeah.
But for just
Maybe.
how wet that thing is and
Yeah.
how it moves and all, it is.
How did they make its eyes move?
Oh God!
I bet he had a bunch of them.
Where's he
I don't
getting-
know.
Where's he getting these feet?
Maybe he's got a friend that's a veterinarian and just is like, hey, whenever you put down a little baby lamb, send that little fucker my way. I don't know.
All right, moving on to something less
Too dark?
horrifying.
Too dark?
Yeah, I'm not into the animals thing. All right, so actually, a fun anecdote I wanted to bring up real quick, and more to the point of just how masterfully this movie is made and why David Lynch, I think, is one of the top directors of all time. So Ryan and I actually saw David Lynch present Eraserhead at the Egyptian Theater a couple of years ago, and Ryan actually got his autograph, which I'm very jealous of. Have you lost it? Did you still have it, Ryan?
I still have it.
Still have it? Cool. But anyway, someone asked David Lynch a question that has stuck with me for a long time, and the question was, like, what is the most important element of being a good filmmaker? And he said it's the wrong question, because the real answer is that every single element, whether it's the sound design, the acting, the music, the cinematography, the framing, every one of them is of monumental importance. And I think that, more to the point of us saying that this is a movie that you feel rather than you think about, once again, this movie wouldn't be the movie without the sound design or without the cinematography or without things that other filmmakers might use as like supplementary materials, but to him, every one of these elements can potentially be the primary tool. And and I think that, like, more than it being cheap, like, that's what you need to teach an independent filmmaker if you're going to be inspired by this, is that, like, don't think that you need to create something with dialogue and characters and arcs and stuff like that. Just create something and, like, truly understand the potential of every tool in the filmmaker's toolbox.
Just David Lynch and Sam Raimi is all you need to learn when you're growing up.
I would say, and Robert Rodriguez, especially early.
Yeah.
He is basically a film teacher that got a few, good Shark Boy and Lava Girls out of him. So
And Linklater too.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are if anyone's ever interested in filmmaking, I think those are good, like, entry points to, like, basically take a free class in filmmaking, is watch any of their movies with director's commentary. I think those are, especially like David Lynch. But going back to, like, the film school thing or whatever, talking about it, but the moment where Henry meets the family, I thought that's when the movie really clicked for me, because I was like, oh, he's so good at these moments of making an interaction play out almost like how he probably felt something. He's so good at conveying feeling through film.
Right.
Because all those awkward things, if you take it literal, you go, everyone's acting really weird. But if you sort of look at it from an allegory perspective, that's probably how he felt. He felt so sick that guts were coming out of a chicken and people are just smiling at him, and he felt uneasy, and he somehow translated that into a film. That's, to me, was genius.
Yeah. Well, and he did become vegetarian when he took up TM. So he gave up alcohol, he stopped smoking, he became vegetarian. So there's a difference between representational art, right? Where, like, this person represents that kind of person, or this scene represents this particular social conflict, and then what we might call expressional art. And he's an expressionist in that sense, that, exactly like you guys are saying, it's something that just kind of flows forth from him. I don't know that I don't think that there's not, I don't think that I would say that it's, like, non-intellectual and that it's just purely mood or feeling, because I don't know if you can separate the two. Because I actually think this film is extremely, it comes from his intellect, but I think it's also aimed at an audience's intellect, not just the mood. Because even deconstructing the normal, right? Like one of the scenes that got me was when Mary's in bed and she's rubbing her eyes, and it's just like that rubbing noise, like it sounds like rubber rubbing together. And I'm rubbing my eye right now, and you can't hear the noise, but there's something about Lynch's profound discomfort within himself. Like, I feel like he feels that, or he's at least able to. I don't know if he walks around all the time like a neurotic, but I think he's able to feel that type of neurosis. And, like, I think Ryan said it earlier, or Jared, kind of the everyday suburban life, but then there's the macabre that infuses in all of these seemingly quote unquote normal things that we just kind of cover over with our fantasies. And he's able to unpack them, to deconstruct the normal by showing the abnormality that is normal. And I think there's something highly intellectual and intentional about that.
Interesting. So, to your point, I want to go back to the David Foster Wallace quote, and how I think that you can look at this movie as kind of dramatizing the mundane in a very dark, macabre way. So, earlier on, we've already said it. The story itself is pretty mundane. It's a man impregnates a woman. They get married. They try to take care of the baby. It sucks, and he fantasizes of escape and other women. That's basically it. And and now if you think about what is the movie I just watched, obviously there's a lot of other shit going on, and you're just like, what the fuck? But you can also take this down to like a little more scenic level. So like the scene that Adam is describing is basically just a guy meets the parents of a girl he just fucked and impregnated, and it's awkward, you know? And you know, yeah, but plus that there's a dog like breastfeeding a bunch of puppies. Mary has like a panic attack, and the mother has to like brush her hair out for some reason to like make her stop freaking out.
There's even a random moment with a grandmother where the mother's trying to make a salad, and almost like a puppet controls the grandmother to mix the salad. And take what you will from it, but everything is just screams weird. Like,
just so grandma has a part in the dinner, it felt like to me.
even what's more common than the patriarch saying, "Come on in, we got chicken tonight," you know? But even those chickens are super small and are bleeding, and then the wife has like some sort of erotic panic attack at the table.
I installed every pipe in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
Look at my knees.
Yeah.
That scene was awesome.
Yeah, and then during that scene too, the music or the sound effects are so loud you can barely hear what the dad is saying.
Yeah.
So it's really unnerving to even watch this normal, like, hey, meet my father scene, you know?
Right. It is the opposite. It is the hey, meet my father scene, but the opposite of a normal one, for sure.
Or maybe that is the normal subjective experience of when you are meeting somebody's father in that kind of situation of duress, and that sound that we hear is the feeling that you actually feel in your head when your blood is rushing and your palms are sweating and your heart is beating fast and your adrenaline is pumping. Maybe that's a sort of oral interpretation of the subjective anxiety that you feel in these quote unquote normal situations, that when you watch a normal film, a normal Hollywood movie covers over it and fantasizes all of these and romanticizes all of these things, like, oh, meet my father, and yeah, they might pretend that there's some awkwardness, but you don't get to see and hear and feel the subjective awkwardness in the same way, and Lynch puts that in the forefront.
Absolutely. I want to ask you guys about the comedy. I mean, so I know that Austin and Adam, it's the first time you guys have seen it. Probably the first time I see it, like, the comedy was just lost to me because I was like so just being assaulted by like, what am I watching?
Huh.
Did you guys?
Yeah,
you guys picked up on it immediately.
I laughed especially at the Eraserhead scene, which I guess where they eventually came up with the name that they found in the edit. I assume. I always thought it was called Eraserhead because his hair.
Yeah.
I was
wrong.
Well,
it's based on. I think it's based on a sketch or a picture or a painting. It's based on a piece of art that Lynch had, some sort of vision that he had of basically that little scene. It's something along those lines that like they took a guy's head and they turned it into erasers or some shit like that. But it's based on some preceding artistic project.
That whole scene to me had me in a very dark humor type of way laughing. It starts with the guy ringing the bell over and over and over, and then just this so weird matter of fact of a child holding a head and then everyone nodding going, yes, this makes sense.
and like the guy who's like super sleazy, who's like taking those dollars off and giving it to the kid, you know?
It's just so, that is so funny because that scene is the most, that's the one that I got nothing out of.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's the one that's infinite or nothing, where you go, oh, what it mean? It's so deep. And I could just see Lynch being like, no, man, it's weird. I had access to a pencil factory and we shot a thing and it's great.
Dude, yeah. See, I feel like you get the most out of that scene because you're like, oh, that's why this movie's called Eraserhead. But you're like, wait, what?
It's so non sequitur. It feels almost like a Family Guy skit. It's
right,
right.
And so that's what I meant by kind of when you're watching this movie, you don't know what to take as literal and what to take as excess, because like there are these moments. Like another thing is like the little thing that he gets in the small black box that he puts in the cabinet, and then it like starts running away.
Oh, the little does the claymation
little worm thing.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Like that's just one of the times where I'm suspending, you know, my desire to come up with a cohesive narrative and just saying, well, that's just excess, just like the Eraserhead quote dream.
But the attention to detail too, talking about the humor, throughout the movie, he has this little dirt hill next to his bed, and there's like a little tree there. There's a scene where he's in the radiator, and they bring out a bigger version of it, and I'm like, how did you know I was paying attention to that?
Yeah.
It had weird little moments like that, which I don't know if they were meant to be humorous, but I found humor in them.
There's one of my favorite comedy moment is Mary's crying. The mother has just revealed that there's a baby, and she goes, "You don't mind, do you, getting married?" Like, what kind of a... And he's just like, "Oh, no, it's fine." Like, like, what kind of a question is that?
And this is after the mom starts, like, necking him, too, a little bit.
Yes, which is super uncomfortable.
I love it.
There's a scene also, or there's a shot where right before Mary's about to leave him, she's, like, goes under the bed, and, like, for a solid 15 seconds, she's doing something.
She's getting a furniture out.
She's getting a suitcase. Yeah. But yeah, that's a great reveal because it's 15 seconds of her just making this grimacing face and her struggling with something. And you're like, what the fuck am I watching? What is going on? And then it's revealed. And after 15 seconds of confusion, it's revealed to be a suitcase. And I think that is a moment of laughter.
Yes, that scene rules.
There's even a moment that I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be horrific, but it comes off as so kind of campy or funny when the baby has what I can only tell of maybe dead maggots in it or something. There's all these. It's just there's a flash, and all of a sudden he goes, "Oh, you're sick," and it's like that's your reaction to like it. It looks like literal death.
Yeah.
And,
how do you guys respond to the death of the baby? That it always kind of upsets me.
That's the scene where I'm like I'm on board with the movie so much, but then I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to be taking from this movie? That's where I like up till then I feel like he doesn't really. He's not telling you one way or the other, but then I'm like, wait, am I supposed to hate this person now? He just killed an alien baby. But I don't know. What do you take?
I mean, I don't really think of it as like there being a higher meaning, but it kind of does. It just that's the most disturbing part of the movie for me because like I don't think the baby deserves to die.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Fuck that guy.
No, it's horrific. It is horrific, and I think the fact that it's like a weird lizard-looking thing or whatever it is. I don't think that diminishes the empathy that it elicits by the fact that that's still a pretty horrific act, and I think that's, I mean, I think that's kind of a point that we can derive from it that that even though this abnormal / normal experience that is on display, the reason that it's so sacrificial is because it still is a sacrifice. It's still something that, even though this is like a grotesque looking thing according to our standards of normalcy, it's still a very grotesque act. And that means that to make the sacrifice of desire in that kind of like interplay of desire and fantasy, in order to do that, you have to go to extreme measures. And it isn't like some sort of like you must kill your baby thing, but it's the fuck, man, like these are the kind of horrific things that we do in our psyche.
Sacrifice. You mean selfish act of murder, Austin?
Yeah, but I think, but I mean, I think, but it's still, it's like in the Bible when Abraham is gonna offer up and sacrifice his son, right? It's
because God told him to.
Right, and
literally told him to.
I think, right, and I think we could say maybe simultaneously in Lacanian psychoanalysis, there's this idea of the big other, which is like this transcendent, so you can replace the big other with God. For like an analogy's sake, right? That you have to sacrifice this thing so that you can cross that barrier into actual enjoyment. Like he can't get to the woman in the radiator. There's an obstacle.
Right.
And so you have to sacrifice. He has to sacrifice the baby.
I get all that. It's more just like, how are we supposed to feel towards the main character at the end of the movie? Are we supposed to say, yes, he did what he needed to do to achieve his higher thing?
Well, do we all agree that it was an accident? Like
an accident?
Well, he's initially
he's trying to cut away the bandages.
Right. That's what I thought, and then he realizes either I fucked it up or the bandages are the body.
See, I took it as he undid the bandages and then saw his heart beating and then was like, die.
Well,
yeah, that's what I thought, too.
That's kind of a mercy killing at that point.
That's what I thought. I thought it was like,
you
shit.
thought it was a mercy kill?
Well, because that would make it better, honestly, in my mind.
How confused would you be if you cut off a cast and all of a sudden your entire arm was exposed?
Right.
Because it didn't look like he had no idea. This is what I'm just taking away from it. That he was cutting the bandages, that there would be, I didn't expect this, that all its guts would splay about.
Right.
Like that, what horrific doctor bandaged that up? Like that's crazy.
Right.
And then it's just sitting there like, it's basically saying like, kill me, kill me, kill me. And it doesn't look like he did it out of malice. It was more of like, oh my God, like it's a super stressful situation.
Interesting.
Though
Okay.
I didn't take any of that literally.
I like that better.
I thought the scissors represented cutting yourself off from something. But that's me. I don't think that's the intention of the movie.
I mean,
but-
why would he be cutting it open? What other reason would he be cutting it open? Just to see what was under? Just to see if he was healed or ready to be undone? I don't know. To me, it seemed like he did it to stab him.
There's definitely a frustration there. I don't know if we can go as far as to say it was to kill him, but he was obviously frustrated with the baby and wanted something to change. Maybe wanted to punish him. Maybe he just thought, oh no, something needs to change. Like this kid needs to be able to like walk on his own and get the fuck out of here or something. So
I'm
he
just
just
gonna
started
stab him to get him off of
the
this
stabbing
table.
comes after the fact that, oh my God, like my child is having a horrible, painful death at the moment.
Gotcha.
You know. All right.
So you thought it was an act of mercy?
I thought it was more of like, oh my God, I'm freaking out right now. And then like at the time it was like he kind of gave in to his darkest impulse to just finish it off.
Let's say even if it is that, then it's really interesting because I think that still fits within this sort of psychoanalytic reading, because then it's to Ryan's question earlier, he said, so is this film kind of saying that we have to do this sort of thing in order to get to satisfaction?
I didn't
no,
really say that.
it's not. You didn't say. What did you ask?
Oh no. I mean, I'm not saying that the movie's telling us we should, but the
you were
guy
asking
in
me.
the movie. Oh yeah.
No,
keep going.
you were asking me if that's what I was saying, and I don't think it's making like a normative claim, like this is what you must do, like you must sacrifice your children or you must like castrate yourself or whatever. But I think what it's showing is that this is like one of the maybe torments of being human, is that we are perpetually doing this. We're cut off from the object of our desire, and that we are perpetually like immolating ourselves. There is like self-flagellation. There is some sort of self-immolation, mortification that is taking place in that strange tension between getting the thing that we want and then kind of not being able to get the thing that we want. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's like you must do this. I think it's just kind of like, fuck, we just do this. So then to what Jared and Adam are saying, this would fit into that, because then it's kind of like he didn't mean to do it, but he got stuck in the situation, and then he was like, fuck, now what do I do? And he kind of just responded, and then he had to do it. So that would, it's kind of like you're thrown into a situation that isn't of your own choosing, and you kind of have to just respond.
Reckless motherfucker.
I don't know.
All right, so let's move on to the mailbag. This one is from John. He's writing about Battle Royale. Have you seen Battle Royale, Adam?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I love the Hunger Games.
So
We don't talk about that.
He says, hey guys, I completely agree with Jared's initial assertion on this one. While anyone can appreciate this movie and recognize it as an excellent piece of filmmaking, familiarity with Japanese culture increases that appreciation immensely. It's not only Kitano's presence, but other things too, like the particular mechanics of Japanese schools, the extreme pressure students feel to get into a good school, the unique generational dynamics which are unlike anywhere else in the world, etc. Finally, I have a question. Do you think that a piece of fiction is less valuable if it's mainly appreciated by a limited target audience, when its themes are not outright universal but pertain to a specific culture? What do you guys think about that?
Hell no. Different strokes for different folks. Sometimes it's a few people, and if it works for them, I mean, I love, like, Enter the Void, someone brought up. I fucking love Enter the Void. Not very many people can sit through that whole movie, but it's a work of fucking art.
Do you think you'd appreciate the movie more or less if you? Where's the director from? Amsterdam?
France.
Okay, yeah. Would you, if you were?
Well, he's like Chilean in French.
Right. Yeah. So if you were more European or South American, do you think you would enjoy it more?
Certainly, kind of like we were saying in the episode, you pick up on references that I certainly, having been brought up here, wouldn't have got. But I don't think that makes it any less valuable. That it's because I don't know. I love movies that are like very regional. Like a certain region. Clueless is a great example. It's
Right. So many LA jokes.
It's a very much it captures one region of the country, and then but people can relate to it all around the world. But yeah, you probably would get more jokes if you're from Southern California.
Yeah, and as far as themes that are outright universal, you got to be careful with that, because if it's completely universal, then it's probably going to be the worst thing in the world. Like, what does that mean? I don't think there's a truly universal audience.
A movie about breathing, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that exist?
Right, real quick, just because I know that people they'll correct us and give us shit. Gaspar Noé is Argentinian, not Chilean. Just because
He's not French either.
He lives in France, but he's from Argentina.
Oh.
All right, so this one is from Yosef. He says, love the podcast. Sometimes I wish you wouldn't talk over each other, but otherwise, I love it.
Can I butt in real quick? No.
What are we talking about?
Just said sorry over that.
All right, this question, although he doesn't direct it to Ryan, I'm going to direct it to Ryan because he says, my question is, if you could recut the second and third Matrix movies into something else, what would you do? You're allowed to name a couple scenes that aren't in existence now and pretend that you have the material to work with alongside the existing footage. So you said in our Matrix Reloaded one that you knew what you would do if you were the Wachowskis. So what would you do with the second and third movies?
So I can only use footage from those two movies?
Fuck that. Do whatever you want.
Well, I mean, I would say my story from the other where Neo gets to the Matrix source, hits the lever. All the people that are in the Matrix get unlocked, and everyone gets free. And then we take over the world back from the machines and stuff.
But is it still covered in darkness? Because
we figure that out,
yeah.
you know. And
then that happens at the end of the second one, or like at the beginning of the second one.
In the first act of the second one. Yeah, that's
Okay.
like the big turning of thing, and then we figure it out by the end. I hate cliffhanger movies. I think they should be outlawed by the U.S. Congress, and so I can't. I don't like the to be continued trend. So I definitely wouldn't end on a cliffhanger. I'd end with us taking over the machines, but then, there'd be room for more.
I watched your guys' Matrix Reloaded video, your recap, and it's one of those movies where I remember trying to like it the more I watched it, and you nailed it perfectly why I think I hate that movie. Or it's not even the hate, it's just I feel sad for, because I think you perfectly illustrate that movie didn't need to exist.
Yeah, it was my relationship with the movie changes over time. I've seen it probably like 25 times, and this most recent time we did it like 2 episodes ago for the podcast, and I was like, this has happened to me like twice in the last couple of years where I'm like, oh my God, I get it now. And then I'm like last time I was like, oh my God, I get it now. Mm-hmm. And so now, as a movie, and this is basically the conclusion we came to, as a movie, it sucks. As a piece of action philosophy, it's rewarding if you think about it really, really hard.
Still don't understand cake that gives you an orgasm.
Yeah.
Very confusing. Weren't there werewolves in that movie?
There were. That you can only kill with silver bullets.
Just right over my head, man.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything smart to say about that, but
Juno Reactor was good. That's the music.
Oh, during the
the Burly Brawl and the freeway chase scene. I remember listening to the soundtrack a lot when I was in college.
Yes, we talked about that. The soundtrack is so good for that movie.
Pretty damn good. But yeah, you're right. It takes about an hour before any actual plot shows up.
It's interesting. I was doing the recap for that one, and basically the second half of the recap basically starts when he gets to the architect, because that's the whole movie. The whole movie is basically what the architect tells Neo, which is not very exciting to watch.
Not really.
Or listen to.
Yeah, I cut all the exposition out from 45 minutes down to 1.
Yeah. All right, this last email is from Razorma12. He says, eyes wide shut, man. Just the discussion alone put me in a weird, uncomfortable, psychosexual state.
You're welcome.
Tell me, what is it you guys think is the true nature of the erotic? Is this nature changeable? And what do you think Kubrick was trying to say about the erotic sexuality? Also, Austin, I'm very curious to hear about your research. You've mentioned Lacan and concepts relating to philosophy of language. Can you please go into detail about what areas of philosophy you study? Please and thank you.
All right, Jared, what's the true nature of the erotic? And go.
I think Austin can probably answer that without sounding like a moron better than me.
No. Well, first of all, hit me up on Twitter, Austin_Hayden, because I don't want to bore you and other people who aren't as interested in my research interests now. But so the true nature from a psychoanalytic Lacanian standpoint of the erotic, I mentioned this in the main part of this episode, is that Lacan says that there is no such thing as a sexual relationship. And what he means by that, in a very simple sense, is that all of our erotic desire is mediated through the symbolic. It's mediated through language, and it's mediated through what we might call fantasy. So when I I'm a straight man, so I'm attracted to women. But if I'm desiring my sexual partner, even in the amorous activity itself, it's never just two bodies fucking, which is important in Eyes Wide Shut, because that's, remember, at the very end of the movie, Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, when they're trying to resolve these tensions that they've had. And we talked about this in the podcast about their conflicting fantasies and the whole idea of these kind of weird understandings of sexual desire and things like that were haunting them. And she says the first thing that they need to do as soon as possible is they need to fuck, right? Because there's this idea that they need to like reinstitute the sexual relationship, quote unquote, even though it's been pretty much established throughout the film that the sexual relationship is always thwarted because it's mediated by these fantastic images. And I don't think this is like some sort of super creative reading. I think that Kubrick was very clear that this is a psychosexual Freudian inspired film, and I think he very clearly was trying to kind of get at something, that the idea of just the pure immediate, which means that there's nothing mediating the relationship, it's just a pure directional kind of connection. The pure immediate sexual relationship is impossible, and you always have something mediating that image, the fantasy, the kind of image that you are projecting onto the other person, the cultural impositions of what beauty or sex is. You know, I'm currently seeing a Brazilian girl, and one of the things that she always talks about is how Brazilian dudes love a big booty, right? So when you look at like music videos and stuff like that, it's all like these Brazilian girls with huge, big booties, and a lot of times they got cellulite. And in America, and especially in Los Angeles, we don't like cellulite. Even though we like the big booty, we want the big booty without the cellulite, you know? So either way, there are these different like regional fantasies that mediate our sexual desires, or the things that make us attracted to a sexual or a potential sexual partner. So that's the main idea from a psychoanalytic perspective that I think Eyes Wide Shut is really exploring, is that there is no such thing as a pure, immediate sexual relationship.
My answer is the true nature of the erotic is that people don't want to die. And that's it. All right.
Whoa.
All
How
right.
sexy.
So dark.
Yeah. All right. So that is going to wrap it up for today. Adam, where can we find you on the internet?
You can check me out and a bunch of other fine gentlemen and women sometimes over at Funhouse.
So that's youtube.com/funhouse.
That's Funhaus. It has a weird German dialect.
Also, check me out. I am on Adam's podcast today.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where we're talking about directorial debuts, and we actually briefly talk about Eraserhead.
Yeah.
So you can check out Filmhouse on their YouTube channel, or it's on iTunes, it's on
Android.
Stitcher, SoundCloud.
It's anywhere you use that Google search engine and you'll find it.
Yeah.
You engaged listener, you.
It's Filmhouse, Filmhaus.
Yeah, we use that little additive to death.
The house, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me at Ryan's Game Show and Ryan's Shorts on Facebook and YouTube. Weekly comedy videos just for you. I love you.
And Austin.
You can hit me up, as I said a minute ago, on Twitter, Austin_Hayden. I also co-host a philosophy podcast called Owls at Dawn. So you can just, again, I guess, use the Google machine and you can find us. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
What are we doing next week?
I don't know yet.
You should do Starship Troopers. I'm throwing that one out there.
I love it.
Every time you say, I just think of the
love
Yes
it.
song. Is the title based on the Yes song? Starship Trooper.
Possibly. It was a
I'm
book before a
sailing
movie,
on.
and
You know what
I
I'm
don't
talking
know.
about?
If
It
you like,
has nothing to do with that song.
Okay.
if you like RoboCop and you like the '90s, I think you'll like Starship Troopers.
You're gonna fucking love it, Jared.
I watched it
I'm
as
so jealous.
I watched it as a test yesterday. I was just testing some streaming in my home, and I was like, I'll see if this Blu-ray version of Starship Troopers works, and I couldn't stop watching it.
Okay.
It's a perfect film.
Top 10
Awesome.
for me.
Oh, wow. That's okay. Cool.
Really?
All right.
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. Okay.
Have you seen it, Austin?
Oh, yeah. I've seen it a few times. I mean, I think one of my favorite things about it is that most people, when it first came out, they didn't get it. American audiences didn't get that it was satire, but it's fucking a social satire or a political satire on fascism. It's fucking awesome.
Mm. Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's it. You can catch me on Instagram at Father of Woody, or check out our Wisecrack Instagram account at Wisecrack, Twitter at Wisecrack. You know the drill.
Watch the new show.
Watch the new show on our YouTube channel, which came out on Tuesday. It's called The Film Tourist. We got one on The Wolf of Wall Street out today, and then we got another one next month on The Shining.
Fuck yeah.
So that's it.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. Signing off.
Goodbye from Hollywood, California.